just young enough to not remember Buddy Holly, who was the entry music that I was welcomed on stage to. So really, what I'd like to do this morning is to just talk to you about what we're seeing in terms of the change in the business environment and also the change in the technology environment. One of the things that we all know, and from conversations I've had with you, with some of you this morning and previous times when I've been here in India, is that we're all undergoing immense change. All of our businesses are being challenged, we're being pressured, both from internal demands, but also from external areas as well. And in order to think about that, in order to live with that, we need to put plans in place. We need to think about what the future holds. And what I'd like to do is to take you through some ideas, some thoughts, and some research to actually give insight as to what we're seeing as to how organizations are really changing. One of the things that we've been doing, and again, you know IDC, we talk to a lot of you about what are the technology trends. But very recently we started to reach out and go beyond that, and we started to talk to CEOs and say, okay, in this era of digital transformation and post-digital transformation, what are you actually looking at? What are you thinking about? How are you actually thinking about your organization is going to look like moving forward? And really what they told us that we're looking at customers. No surprise there, but what's different? We're looking at this idea of being able to create empathy with all of our customers. We're going beyond this hyper-personalization to actually establish a new type of relationship. We're rethinking our operations. We focused a lot on efficiencies and driving all of our assets to 100% efficiency. But now we've actually got to think about satisfying market demand. We've got to think about our capabilities. And we also need to think about trust. We want our customers to trust us. You know, and again, that starts with some of our security. The last thing you want to do is go to a client and say that their data has been lost. So again, how do they actually trust us from that aspect, but also trust the products and services we deliver? We also need to think internally and look at our things such as our capabilities. Talk about how we become an intelligent organization. And again, this starts to talk around this idea of actually making decisions based on data. No longer is it a gut feel, we're actually making it based on data. And again, if we're clever, we can start to think about how do we use that data to give a predictive outcome so we know we're making the best decision. Around innovation. How can we actually change our internal organization? How can we actually change the products and services we offer? And in order to do that, and this is very interesting, we're starting to see CEOs think about the technology infrastructure that is really enabling and powering the business going forward. And I think this is good news for all of you in the room, because it might mean that your budgets go up, because that infrastructure is starting to actually appear at the CEO level. And finally, and I think one of the most important things that the CEOs told us is this notion about going towards industry ecosystems, a change in the way we view how we're actually doing business. And I'll share an example with about that when I get towards the end of the presentation. So in terms of what these CEOs are telling us, this is what that future enterprise looks like. If you think about it, we've actually been going through a transformational aspect where we've been focused on data and really actually moving forward. But now we've transformed, and now we're starting to think about this notion of a future enterprise. And if we look at what the technology we have in place supporting this, we can see that we've really gone from this era of experimentation. We termed it the third platform, which is that cloud, mobile, social, big data. And now we're starting to combine this with other technologies, IoT, analytics, blockchain, security, additive manufacturing, robotics. And we're starting to put these things together, which is enabling us to actually operate in many, many different ways. And if you start to think about it, we're at the start of this innovation journey. Again, we're starting to see more and more IoT pilots move to scale, We're starting to see artificial intelligence become embedded in the applications. We're really moving forward into this idea around innovating and bringing all these different technologies together. And it's when they're together that we really see that difference that is going to be made. And then we're going to move toward this era of autonomy. And this is where we start to see the advanced use of artificial intelligence. We start to see the use of quantum computing and actually get more and more into some of these interfaces and connecting computers to us, something like the robot behind me. Again, I think that's a few years out, as you can see. But this is where we see these technologies coming in to actually enable this change. And one of the things that we really see as driving this is this notion around platforms and platformification. So one of the things that we've done is actually looked across all of our industry predictions, all of our industry forecasts, and started to see what's actually happening around this journey to platformification. If we start to look at and this is an example from mining, we're starting to predict that within the next year, we're going to see a focus around operational platforms come into the mining industry, really to start to drive the efficiencies. So again, a connection of a lot of use of the IoT data and actually bringing that in to give some visibility as to what's happening at the mine site. As we go into 2021, we really start to see utility companies, we start to see retailers really look at how they can actually integrate beyond ERP and bring all those enterprise applications together. This notion around internal integration. But then as we get into 2022, this is when we start to see the platforms expand and become really focused on going outside of our organization and connecting across the ecosystem. So this is where we're starting to see that idea of innovation across the ecosystem driven by a platform. And then as we actually get into 2023, this notion around digital twins. The example we have here is around smart cities, where we see more and more cities actually embark on a digital twin strategy. And again, you're starting to see it here in India with the likes of Jaipur. Being able to actually create models of how the city operates and look to actually optimize how we can actually improve the life of the citizens in the city. And I do know, having been in Bangalore this week, anybody who can do anything with the traffic would really get a big vote of support from the individuals living and working in the city. And then finally, as we start to go out, we start to see this notion of governments starting to adopt platforms. In this particular area, it's around some of the trade platforms to actually speed up imports and exports. So again, as we start to think about this journey of platformification, we're going from operations to internal integration to external ecosystems to digital twins to trade. But again, this is all brought together through this notion of a platform of platforms. Because you're not going to be just do one of these things. It's going to be a journey, and you're actually going to build on top of each of these and then think about how these things actually interconnect. So just to give you some context and some examples as to why we see platforms are important, and also to give you an idea around what we're seeing from the business case. You all know who this gentleman is, Jack Ma, Alibaba. He coined this concept of new retail. And I love this because it sounds so simple. The integration of online, offline logistics and data across a single value chain. So simple. But when you actually look at what that actually requires, and we start to bring in all the different processes, all the different applications, and bring those together to actually deliver on this, it becomes very, very complex. And just to give you an idea as to how big this has become, and we'll talk about how he's actually managed to do this, Alibaba, one company, on Singles Day, sold over $30 billion worth of products. The entire US Black Friday to Cyber Monday was around about 24. What was most impressive about the Alibaba numbers is when in the first 68 seconds they sold $1 billion worth of goods. In the first hour, they sold 16 billion worth of goods. But on the back end, when we actually look at the logistics, they actually shipped 1.2 billion shipments through their courier network. 1.2 billion shipments on that day. Absolutely staggering numbers in terms of actually being able to coordinate across warehousing, across delivery services, notifications to customers to say when they were going to deliver. Absolutely amazing when you actually look at the scale that's actually required to do that. And how they actually managed that, how they did that, is through this idea of a retail commerce platform. This idea of bringing all the enterprise services on one end, the customer services on the other, and actually bringing that all together, supported by artificial intelligence, machine learning, obviously in a secure way, and also supported by the data services, the infrastructure to actually deliver on that. So again, being able to coordinate that and deliver on that new retail requires that change in approach, that change in organization of the data, and that change in action of the data. And really, when we actually look at it, it makes sense. Some work we've been doing looking across retailers worldwide, we've looked at and categorized retailers that we saw as digital, semi-digital, and non-digital, digital laggards, and looked at how they were operating in terms of their profitability. When we plot those in an index, you can actually see those that are digital are 100% more, have become 100% more profitable than those that are non-digital. We then also looked across our global survey work and actually to identify what was the digital DNA, what made these retailers stand out, what was it that actually really they were doing differently from their peers. And when we looked at that, we saw that this idea of actually implementing that retail commerce platform, that was the key standout point that was that digital DNA in making those retailers successful. So we're really starting to get to the point where the profitability of the organization is being driven by that technology implementation and that technology strategy. And again, we can actually see this when we start to look across other industries such as manufacturing. Again, the difference between those who are actually moving forward with this is key. And we mentioned this move to automation, and again, there are many, many examples, and those of you who've submitted nominations for the Insights Award, again, we're starting to see more and more case studies around automation. So I thought the best way to actually demonstrate the growth was to actually just give you the numbers. And if you look at the growth rates as well, in terms of the adoption of automation over the next this is over the next 5 years, from 2017 to 2022, you can really see that it's those organizations, those business sectors that are focused on the business to consumer space are really leading the way in terms of the adoption of artificial intelligence. Things like retail, banking, and then we see it flowing down in terms of some of the manufacturing areas. And again, anything where you're starting to have that large-scale connection with customers, remember what I said about treating the customers with empathy, this is where we need to bring that technology in to actually understand you as an individual, not just your preferences, but to understand who you are and what drives you, and to be able to actually provide products and services that are actually going to deliver that to your requirements. So we've talked around this road to platformification. We've talked around the advantages in terms of the profitability and in terms of what is that digital DNA. I now want to just give you an idea as to what we're actually seeing in terms of industry ecosystems actually developing. Because one of the things, if you remember, the CEOs told us is they want to know what that future is actually going to look like. And some work we've been doing looking at the automotive sector, again, very big here in India. They're going through some challenges at the moment. We have the traditional approach of automotive. Again, we're typically talking about a 4 to 6 year launch cycle where we go from platform and product design all the way through to actually engaging with the supply chain, through the design development, we go into the production, and then we actually go through to the end of life, the shipping and inventory, dealer service, etc., etc. Traditional, very, very linear approach. But those of you who've been looking and reading the news recently, you'll have seen a number of automotive companies making significant changes to the way their business actually operates. Mercedes-Benz saying they were going to remove 10,000 individuals and focus more on electric vehicles. But we're starting to look at this idea around this idea of a passenger economy ecosystem. The automotive guys are not going to be designing and developing cars for you as an individual to buy. They're going to be going into selling them to the likes of the ride-sharing providers, you know, the Ubers of the world, the Grabs of the world. We're going to see more and more engagement with smart cities having a say in how cars are developed and used. They're going to be traced. Is the city actually going to be providing the car sharing services? When I'm in the car and it's being driven, maybe autonomously, what am I going to do? I'm probably going to go shopping on my phone. I'm going to be consuming some entertainment, or as my boss is here, I'm probably going to be answering some work emails. But again, we're actually going to be providing services to the passenger for him or her to do what they actually want to do. And again, we're going to start to see that actually being developed and become part of this ecosystem. So what I'm trying to say to you and what I'm telling you is that we need to start to rethink how our products and services are actually going to be consumed. This is one of a number of areas that we're starting to look at. Other ones being things such as the smart grid, this idea of being able to sell power back into utilities. The last mile delivery economy, which does actually overlap with the passenger economy, as we start to see more of these ride-sharing services also offer delivery services, whether it be goods or whether it be food, etc. But there's going to be some rethinking and some reshifting in actually considering how we're actually going to run our organizations and run our businesses in the future. And in order to be able to do this, again, we see that move towards platforms being able to integrate with other platforms across varying different organizations, and perhaps organizations that we've not really worked with before. That's what's going to come together to actually power this new idea of the passenger economy ecosystem. So really, again, the takeaways that I want you to think about and to consider as you go through the rest of the day is really the platform approach is here to stay, and it's going to be part of your digital DNA going forward as you really need to think about how we're operating internally, but also how we connect externally. And again, it's actually being driven by those business requirements from the CEO level. We do see the need to start internal and then start to go external. And really, that idea of creating that intelligent core, that platform, is really going to be that key decision you're going to make over the next 1 to 2 years that's really going to power you as you become that future enterprise. And with that, thank you very much for your kind attention, and I wish you an enjoyable and informative rest of the day. Thank you.